He had built an empire that stretched across continents, but no amount of zeros in his bank account could fill the hollow space that had quietly taken over his chest. For years, the people closest to him had stopped expecting warmth. They had accepted the cold version of him as permanent, the way you accept winter after forgetting that spring ever existed. Before we go further, let us know in the comments what time is it right now, and where in the world are you watching from. Now, let's begin. His estate sat on a hillside overlooking a city that never slept. Every room was designed by the world's finest architects, every corner filled with objects that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Yet walking through those halls felt like walking through a museum after closing time. Beautiful, silent, and completely untouched by anything living. The staff moved through the house like shadows, eyes down, voices low, careful never to disturb the atmosphere he had built around himself like armor. Everyone except her. She was his housekeeper, ordinary in the way that genuinely good people often are. She did not know how to perform smallness around powerful people. She simply worked, cleaned, cooked, and moved through the house with the kind of ease that comes from having nothing to prove. She never flinched when he passed her in the hallway. She never rushed to disappear. She treated him the way she would treat anyone else, like a person, and somehow that was the most unusual thing anyone had ever done for him. He noticed her, of course. Hard not to, but he never acknowledged it. He had spent years perfecting the art of noticing without reacting, feeling without showing, surviving without living. His expression had become his shield, and he wore it every moment of every day without exception. Behind it lived a grief so old it had stopped feeling like grief and started feeling like identity. Then came an evening that looked exactly like every other evening before it. The house was settling into its usual quiet. The lights were low, the air was still, and he had retreated to his study as he always did, sitting in the chair by the window, watching the city lights flicker below without really seeing them. He hadn't meant to stay awake. He simply hadn't found a reason to move. She came in to tidy the room, carrying her small routines like she always did. She glanced over and assumed he was resting, eyes half closed, mind elsewhere. So she allowed herself something she rarely did at work. She let herself just be. Music drifted from her phone, barely louder than a whisper, something gentle and rhythmic. And then, almost without deciding to, she began to move with it. Not dancing in any formal sense. More like her body remembered happiness and simply responded to it. Her steps were small, her movements loose, a quiet smile spreading across her face for no audience and no reason except that the song made her feel like herself. He opened his eyes fully. He watched her without moving, without breathing differently, the way you watch something rare because you're afraid any movement might make it disappear. There was no performance in what she was doing, no self-consciousness. She laughed softly when she nearly stumbled on the edge of the rug, caught herself, and kept going, unbothered, unashamed. That small moment of laughter at her own imperfection did something to him that years of silence had not prepared him for. Something moved in his chest. Not pain, not exactly. Something older than pain, something that had been waiting underneath it for a very long time. He watched her spin once, carelessly, joyfully, and his mind traveled somewhere he had forbidden it to go for years. He remembered what it felt like to move through the world without carrying this weight. He remembered someone else who used to fill rooms with that same effortless energy, someone whose absence had convinced him that joy was not something you got to keep. His hand gripped the arm of the chair. The memories came slowly at first, then all at once, the way they always do when you finally stop running from them. He had locked them away not out of cruelty but out of survival, telling himself that a man who felt nothing could not be destroyed again. And for years that logic had held. Until now. Until her. He felt his lips move, and he didn't stop them. A sound came out, soft and unfamiliar, so quiet he almost didn't recognize it. He went still. His heart was doing something strange, beating faster than it had in years, not from fear but from something he could not immediately name. He pressed his hand to his chest as if to confirm it was real. The sound came again, a little clearer this time. A laugh, small, tentative, like something waking from a very long sleep. She heard it. She turned around and froze, the music still playing softly behind her. Her smile vanished instantly. Every comfortable feeling left her body in a single second as she stood there bracing for the consequence she was certain was coming. She had overstepped. She had forgotten herself. She waited for his voice to cut through the room the way everyone said it could. Instead, she saw his face. Something in it had shifted. His expression, always carved from stone, had softened around the edges. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. His eyes, which she had always found difficult to look at directly, were different now. They weren't cold. There was something in them she had never seen before, something that looked almost like relief. Neither of them spoke for a moment. When he finally did, his voice was low, a little rough, like a door being opened for the first time in years. He told her she had done nothing wrong. 4 words, but they carried more weight than he knew. She exhaled. The fear left slowly. Confusion took its place, because this was not the man she had heard stories about, the man everyone in the house walked on eggshells around. He was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. He told her that he had forgotten what it felt like to just be somewhere without everything hurting. She said nothing. She understood that silence was the right response. He looked toward the window, gathering himself, and began to speak about things he had kept sealed for years. About someone he had loved. Someone whose laughter used to be the first thing he looked forward to every morning. Someone he lost suddenly, without warning, without the chance to prepare or say the right things. After that loss, he said, he had made a decision without fully realizing it. He had decided that feeling things was too dangerous for a man who had already lost everything that mattered. So he stopped. He built the house bigger, the walls higher, the schedule tighter, and he convinced himself that this was called strength. She listened without flinching, without pity, without the kind of careful sympathy that always felt like distance. He told her that watching her tonight had reminded him of something he didn't expect, not just of what he had lost, but of what he had willingly abandoned in himself, the ability to laugh at a stumble, to move without strategy, to exist in a single moment without managing it. He had handed those things away piece by piece and called it growth. He looked at her directly then, and something in his expression was both broken and quietly resolved. He said that he had been alive all these years, but had not actually been living, and that the difference between those two things had never been clearer to him than it was right now, in this room, because of a woman dancing alone who thought no one was watching. She smiled, not the careful smile she wore when she was uncertain of the room, a real one. He stood slowly, not with the authority he usually wore like a second skin, but with the careful movement of someone relearning how to carry themselves. He told her that things were going to change in this house. He didn't say it like a man making a business decision. He said it like a man making a promise to himself, out loud for the first time. She nodded, and her eyes held something steady and genuine, the quiet recognition that she had witnessed something important. He admitted that he didn't know exactly what healing looked like from here, but for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, he was willing to find out rather than run from the question. That, he said, was enough for now. Before we close out, drop a comment and let us know what time it is, where you are, and where in the world you're watching from. We see every single one, and your presence here genuinely means something to us. He smiled once more before she left the room, still imperfect, still unfamiliar on his face, but real in a way that nothing in that house had been for a very long time. The estate hadn't changed. The city still glittered below. The hallways were still quiet. But something invisible had shifted inside those walls, the way a season changes not in a single moment, but in the slow accumulation of small true things. No promises were made that night that couldn't be kept. No wounds closed overnight. But a window had been opened in a room that had been sealed shut for years. And sometimes, that is exactly where everything begins. The story ends here, but the journey continues. Like, subscribe, and come back for the next story that will stay with you long after it's over.